I'm excited to see everybody here because I think that means that this is a helpful session in kind of validating some of the work that we've put in, and specifically some of the things that we want to talk about. We've cutesy named it How to Perform an OS Migration in Your Sleep. And basically what we want to talk about is we've got this new operating system from Apple that's coming, and so this is a big pressing work that's coming down as administrators. So how do we do that? How do we help from a Casper Suite perspective facilitate that migration and actually make that easier for us as administrators? My name is John Miller. I'm one of the product managers here with Jamf Software, and I'm joined by Nick, who's going to come in at the end and kind of give a little bit. We're going to first spend some time talking about just general introduction, and then understand the scope of the problem that we have. I think who's done an OS migration on an Apple platform? So most of us understand the scope, but I'm an analytical type of person, so I like to see some numbers and just kind of see what happens there, and I'll try to step out of your way and not block the way. But then we're going to talk about the current methodology that we've had. If anyone was here at the JNUC last year, we talked about doing self-service upgrades and some of the stuff in that, and so just kind of getting an idea for what are the paths that I have forward currently, and what are the new paths that we have, and then Nick is going to come and talk about that new path, that new method for actually doing an upgrade, right? So that's kind of what we're going to talk about. Like I said, as always, we've got Q&A time at the end, so we'll do that. First thing we want to talk about is just kind of a general introduction about imaging and kind of give some numbers about imaging as a whole. So to give an idea for how important imaging is within the Jamf Nation community, there's a couple things that I find interesting. This is a few days old. But just using the Install ESD knowledge base article, this is one of our more popular articles with just over 4,500 views. Kind of cool. What I think is more interesting is this one. Anybody see this imaging article, Deploying OS 10? Right, so there's, I think, something like 35,000 views, distinct views, is that right? Yes, the person who wrote it is here, celebrity. It's the very top viewed knowledge base article on Jamf Nation by something like 15,000 views. So it's not just like people are a little bit interested in imaging. This is a big deal for everybody. And so we've got this article on how do we actually do imaging? What are ways that I can utilize these technologies from Apple? What does this mean for me as an administrator? We got a couple seats if you guys want to sprinkle yourselves in, or if you're comfortable there, you can stay. But this is an important thing for administrators. How do we do imaging? So much so that it's not Casper focus or not some of these more kind of advanced, not even advanced, but like kind of further down the stream of getting a device in an end user's hands. This is how do I get what I need on the device and get it to my end users as easily as possible. That's a huge problem in the community. And so we wanted to provide ways to help administrators do this migration process. So the big part about imaging, the big issue with it is time. Every year, Apple's releasing new software updates. We have to update all those devices so that our end users can take advantage of this functionality. When we've got the labs here, this is from Pratt Institute lab. This is kind of their lab, so everybody's probably got a lab like this or a shared use environment. And what this means for us as administrators and the time that it takes to actually go through and update all these devices. This is a huge time commitment, right? Let alone our end users, right? We got Julia with her computer. What's Julia going to do to move from her current version of the operating system to the new one that comes out from Apple? One of the big strategies we've seen about this as a way to kind of hold off all that workload because of the time that it takes is to just buy a bunch of devices, because everything that comes from Apple comes with the new OS, and maybe or maybe not, our management infrastructure, and not just the Casper Suite, but also our workflows and our processes may not be ready for that new operating system for whatever reason. And so people buy just bunches of devices and keep them in an inventory, and then that kind of trickles down to the end users as their management updates and as they can use those new things. But they're just saying, hey, I want to keep my folks on 10.8 because 10.8 is what I know. I know 10.9 is coming. We're just going to buy a bunch of stuff, keep it in a warehouse, and use it someday, right? This is an annual problem that we see. I wanted to see their actual deployment and kind of history, and I'll try to step out of your way. This is from 10.0, right, Cheetah, all the way down the date and the version that they've updated. And so you kind of get a feel for, I think there's some people that are kind of cringing, like, holy crap, this is actually an every year occurrence for me to have to update all these devices, update our shared use devices, update the devices that are in the hands of our end users. And some of these times, I think the largest gap here is between Tiger and Leopard, maybe a little bit here between Snow Leopard and Lion. Same idea though, 18 months, give or take, Apple's got to release out. That's an aggressive schedule when you can think about the time that this takes, in testing and packaging and verification. We don't talk about how between these two PPC support dropped, like that's a big deal. So what software do I have that is actually running in Rosetta that doesn't have Intel architecture support? There's a lot of stuff in there, right? So this can be a very stressful time for administrators to actually understand the scope of how often we have to do the updates. At the end of this, one of the things that I've talked to a few different people with that I'll kind of challenge the rest of the community, when we talk about these new workflows, really what we're hoping to do is help bring that time down, right? It used to take me X amount of time to update all my inventory, and now I did it in hopefully this much smaller amount of time. We want to hear that and actually be able to quantify that, to be able to say, as a community, we were able to save 1,000 hours of functional workday, or maybe nights and weekends days, or whatever that may be. And this is what we were able to do with that. I think that's a cool story that we can tell and kind of give each other motivation outside of this specific event to say, here's what we're able to do from that. We're looking at ways to do this with the Casper suite, and the things that we have available in the tool today can help us with a lot of these different functionalities. The first one that we've got is just, we can use Composer to actually, we take a device, we put all the new stuff that we want on it, right? If that's a new operating system from Apple or whatever that may be, we get that set up, and we use Composer to actually make an image of that, and then we can actually deploy that down to this appropriate configuration and to those correct devices using the Casper suite, right? Probably familiar stuff that people have done. This is typically the nuke and pave type of idea. Get everything I want, deploy it, get it all onto the devices. Everybody's happy on that. We've also got new functionality to actually take advantage of the Recovery HD, right? We can use the Casper suite. This is stuff we've had since a while ago, I guess when the Recovery HD came, but we can use Composer to actually make an image of the Recovery HD. We can use our configurations to split a partition, put the Recovery HD on one, the real OS on the other, and kind of have that recovery partition there as well. So we could take advantage of Find My Mac and file vault encryption, some of that stuff that's there. Last year we talked a lot about actually utilizing self-service and the stuff that came from Apple and doing some tricks with the install Mac OS 10 whatever .app. I think it changes a little bit with each one. And actually using that to allow our end users to do a self-initiated upgrade of the operating system, and all great things that we can still do in the new stuff that we want to talk about, right? We can still do the nuke and pave method. All these new methodologies, or all the existing methodologies rather, still exist. You can still do them. Everything's going to work the same or very similar. Use those workflows if that makes sense for you, right? The other part that we have within these workflows is the actual transport methods to get this technology down to our end user devices. And so you can see we've got like the full disk where we can do that. We can boot to a built-in Recovery HD if we use that. That's something that I think we started doing in like version 3, where you could carve off another drive and put in your own Recovery HD with a separate OS. It's only 5 gigs and blah, blah, blah. You can do that. That's all gonna work, and boot to something. NetBoot helps with that, right? We can NetBoot to a different environment, and then that will get us off the disk that we want to wipe and put down a new configuration to do this upgrade for us. With 8.5, we introduced Thunderbolt imaging and target mode imaging, which actually doesn't have to be Thunderbolt. It's just Thunderbolt's the fastest, direct connect, plug and play technology that's there. Casper imaging was updated to be able to just plug drives in and one at a time, move those to the new operating system for what we have. But with each of these, there's kind of some more work involved. And there's a lot of stuff that, as an admin, having to manage a NetBoot environment, that's a whole other environment, whole other infrastructure, whole other VLAN, and a lot of other stuff that I have to do just to migrate my devices, just to move my users over to a new device or labs over to a new operating system, and the stuff that happens in that. What we're excited about is how we can help this change with Mavericks, and Zach alluded to this a little bit in the keynote, and I'm going to invite Nick up to talk a little bit more about how this works in our environment, the things that we can do in the new version of the Casper suite, with the goal of bringing that time down and having a way to do that with maybe not all those other infrastructure pieces that we have. So here's Nick.
All right, thanks, John. Yeah, so a lot of us saw the video and the keynote, and we're probably like, how do I do that? It must be a lot of setup. We're going to kind of break it down for you today, and we've really tried to make this a very straightforward process, as I think you'll see in the videos here. We're really excited about it. So starting off with requirements, you're probably wondering, where do I have to start? What are the different combinations I can do to be able to upgrade, let's say, from 10.6 to 10.7? It all starts with having 10.6.8 on your devices, and Apple does have some KB articles out there basically outlining what the requirements are, and we basically adhere to those same requirements for this process. So starting out with 10.6.8, you can upgrade to 10.7, you can upgrade to 10.8, and as John mentioned, there is a future OS coming, we think, pretty soon here, and it is going to work with that as well as future versions that use this same technology. So how do we do it? There's a couple of steps. Number one, people might be familiar with this, but uploading the install ESD. For this one, we actually take that entire app and move it into Casper Admin. There are certain components that it extracts out of that and copies up to your distribution points, your cloud, whatever you're using for distribution. So we'll show how that works. The second step, and this is kind of optional, but caching the installer. These things are big. It's about 4.5 gigs, as you've seen from the Mac App Store. We need that entire 4.5 gigs on the devices. So we're going to show you how you can set up a policy to actually cache that down to your users. So it's all there, and it's very quick when they actually hit the install button. The third step is creating a smart group to figure out which users have it. So this cache might take place over the period of a couple of weeks, and we can use smart groups to actually detect which ones have it rather than which ones have started it, right? And last, creating the policy that the end users will actually click in self-service, okay? So this is what we do at Jamf to upgrade our users. So we want the end user to be in control of when this happens on their own time. The other part I want to mention is this is the scenario we're walking through today, and this does not have to be end user initiated either. This can be completely automated in the background for labs and stuff like that. Last part is the actual upgrade, right? So we'll show the same video that everybody's seen. Not much thunder there, I guess, because you've all seen it, but we'll take a look at that again. So the first step, again, is to take that app from the Mac App Store and drag it right into Casper Admin. So we drag it on top there. It does some analyzing to figure out what's in there, and there it is, uploaded into Casper Admin. The next step is caching the OS upgrade, right? So this is pretty standard. We're just going to create a new policy to do this. We're going to give it a name. And then for the trigger on this one, we just decided to use the recurring check-in trigger. So the next time that our machines check in after we create this policy, we want users to start getting this right away. So we use the recurring check-in. Then we go to packages. We add that package that we uploaded using Casper Admin. Instead of the install action here, we're going to select the cache action. So this is just like any other package cache if you've done that before. And then for scope, in this case, we're just going to scope it to all computers, but you could certainly create a smart group that meets the requirements for the OS upgrade. And then we save the policy, and the next time your clients check in, they will start getting this file, right? And so that moves us on to, all right, who's got it? And that's where we use the smart group to be able to detect that. So we're going to create a new smart group here. I'm just going to call it OS Upgrade Cached. And then we're going to select the cache packages criteria. And we've got that little browse button, so that package will show up in our list. We can choose it. And then we save the smart group, and that's all it takes. So that's going to show us whatever clients actually have that cached on them right now. Next is actually creating that policy that the end users are going to use to install this, right? So again, back to policies. For the display name here, you want to actually be careful about what you name it, because this is what your end users are going to see in self-service, right? So we call it install mountain lion in this case. We're going to select the package. And again, we've got something kind of special here. Instead of selecting install, we want to make sure we select install cached. Okay, so instead of grabbing it from the network, we want to make sure it gets it from that location that we cached it to. And then some stuff happens for reboot as well. This does require a reboot, obviously. So we want to give the user perhaps a message that says, your computer is going to reboot, and we can be in charge of the delay. So how much time are we going to give them to save their stuff, right? But for the scope, we're going to select that group of who has it cached. We're going to make this available in self-service. And then we're going to just take that icon right from the app and upload it so that that's what people see. This is something that people are used to identifying that this is an OS upgrade with, so we're just going to upload that directly. And then lastly, on the user interaction tab, this is where you could actually put a message before it runs and tell them, hey, this is going to take a while. You can also customize the message that they see when it actually needs to reboot. So there's some stuff that we've added for version 9 right there. So that's all it takes from your standpoint, really, to get this thing down to the end users. When they open self-service, this is going to be available for any user who has it cached on their computer. And then what it actually looks like from the end user's perspective is they're going to launch self-service. They're going to click install for that policy. Since it's cached, this is going to go very quickly. It's simply just a matter of moving files from one location to another. They get a message here, and then it reboots. One very important thing to note here is it's not rebooting to netboot. It's not rebooting to a restore partition. This is rebooting the way that Apple has actually built it to reboot. So this is just like an end user double-clicking on the upgrade. We sped up the video again, so you didn't have to sit through the whole thing. After the upgrade happens, you're going to have another reboot. You're going to have a couple of setup assistants depending on what version you're going from to. And then we can see that the user is successfully upgraded. So all their documents are still in place. We didn't need netboot there. We didn't need a restore partition. Hopefully this makes it a lot better, right? So we're really excited, actually, to see you guys start implementing this to really alleviate a lot of the pain. We're excited to start using it at Jamf. We have to get all of us upgraded to the next version of OS 10, and can't wait to see, like John said, the impact of how much time does this actually save you. I think taking netboot out of the equation probably is going to save a lot of time, right? So at this point, I'd like to open it up to Q&A. Some people might have some questions about it, and we're happy to answer that.
Yes, Andrew.
So we did this for our teachers last year, actually, and kind of modified.
Forget the microphone.
So just to give you a sort of case study, yeah, we did this process for our teachers last year. We had 2,000 teachers with laptops that we needed to get to 10.8, and so we kind of modified a version of that threw a launch item on there. So after it rebooted, after the upgrade, it did a bunch of cleanup stuff for our end, and it was great. I think 1,900 of them did it. They just went to self-service, pushed a button, and so that was 2,000 laptops we didn't have to collect and do over the summer. So
Yeah,
worked well.
that's awesome. I think that, a lot of the stuff that we've focused on so far has been end-user initiated stuff, but a lot of education spaces and a lot of other places, there's those labs as well. And so it's the end-user option where you can click the button to do the reboot and do the actual upgrade through self-service. But with it's booting to a folder, and so the JSS actually has that path as a built-in option to select, I want to reboot to this. And so then your same rules apply of, I want to reboot these machines at night while you're sleeping to this directory or this path for all intents and purposes, and the next morning everything is there. You can do user data backup stuff if you want, but this is kind of more leveraging what Apple's made available and the QA that they do on their side to be able to do some of this stuff on that. So either one of those workflows are great. Going over here.
Another case study, we did 10.6 to 10.7 for about 1,000 machines. Very similar process to what you're describing. A couple gotchas that we ran into. We have a hidden administrator account. It's hidden inside var. The upgrade does not understand that. So you need to make sure that you account for that in a script. Either recreate the user or have a script to build a new one. And also we discovered that when you're caching the installer, I could only get it to work successfully over HTTP. AFP caching just failed. It corrupted the cache file.
Okay. That's something we can take a look at. Thanks, Damien.
So the policy change from self-service, if you wanted to initiate it yourself from Casper as like the admin on every lab in one building between 5 at night and like 2 in the morning, you just change the trigger, right? So you just force it to do the install cache and just change the trigger to on the any trigger or whatever.
Yeah.
As long as the labs are on and ready to go and the machines aren't down, next time they check in or whatever, it'll push.
Yep, it's just like any other policy. And in that case, you wouldn't even necessarily have to cache it. You could just say, I'm going to prepare for this. I'm going to make sure our network is up and ready to handle that kind of bandwidth at that time period. And you wouldn't necessarily have to cache it either.
So kind of a two-parter. Are there any mechanisms currently for verifying that the destination can accept that upgrade?
So
Like, we got system version, we have drive space, we have RAM requirements.
Smart group.
Well, okay, so yeah, right, you make a smart group. Crafting a smart group is very difficult, especially when you have a lot of things you want to put in that smart group. So some documentation around a recommended smart group to verify that those, like, here's the smart group you need to not accidentally try to run this installer on something that doesn't work. So like hardware requirements, RAM requirements, things
Yeah.
like space requirements.
yeah, good thought. That knowledge base article, that 35,000 view one, that was one that, as a part of the team that we worked on this, we're like, well, what do we do with that article? Because there's a lot of, I mean, that's a pretty important one to the community. And so Aaron was able to do a lot of updates and put some stuff in there. I think we can put in more information, whether that's a separate article or just, we can communicate some stuff out where that would help on that. Is that both parts you said you had?
Yeah, like knowing what the smart group should be
'Kay.
to avoid getting that asset out to a device that shouldn't even have it.
Got it. Yeah, I think.
That would be really hard to architect all the different conditions under where it could fail.
Yeah. The other thing I'll add to that is if it does fail or if the drive doesn't have enough space or whatever, it is using the Apple installer. So the worst thing that would happen is it would be handled the same way that an end user trying to upgrade their machine would be handled, right? So they handle that pretty gracefully.
That's good, but I wouldn't even prevent that from happening. Like maybe have a smart group of like devices that can't do it.
Yeah. Yep.
On top of that, your point right there, the smart groups, like the specs from Jamf and from Apple, we have computers that just check, make sure they have enough hard drive space, enough RAM, and all that stuff. Another thing you might want to consider is if you're coming from 10.6, we have a lot of clients in our environment that are still on 10.6. They have programs that are compiled in 95 and 96, run on PowerPC. There are scripts out there that will go through your apps folder and find all those, and we have something that will tell clients like, hey, just so you know, these apps aren't going to work anymore, because that's happened to us a few times. They come get their computer and like, oh, this isn't working, and yeah, too bad. Hitting on the local admin.
That's compassion right there. Too bad.
I work in IT.
Yeah.
About the hidden admin accounts, very real. That's not a Jamf thing. I'm sure you found out. That's the upgrade path. We have smart computer groups that just check to make sure those local accounts exist. If not, use the Jamf binary to create those accounts. Yep.
Yeah.
And then my question is there an easy way on the Jamf side to throttle the caching process of these things? That way, if somebody's on site and we do want to cache it, but we want to be very bandwidth aware and just do it very slowly, what are your recommendations?
Yeah, so it depends on the technology that you're using for the share itself. So this kind of goes, I don't have to repeat the question because you have a microphone. The throttling is available in the JDS to say this is what's capable there. On the other side, we're looking at AFP, SMB shares, the other distribution stuff. We don't have stuff in the JSS interface itself to say, hey, this share throttle this to that. JDS has that. We got one up here, Chris.
2 questions. What does your shirt say?
All right, so we have a lot of shirts at Jamf. I don't know if you know this, and a lot of them are just really weird inside jokes. And so my shirt says, I haven't been this excited about imaging in a long time. Does anybody know that reference? Dusty knows it. Jamf folks know it. Will knows it, yeah. So we did an event, 8.5, for the launch of 8.5, to talk about target mode imaging. And as a part of that, Nick was helpful enough to do some talking about imaging and what we have available in 8.5. And as a part of that, he said, I haven't been this excited about imaging in a long time. And we just thought that was funny, and so we made T-shirts. And so now I figured I had to wear it, right?
So I haven't been this excited about OS upgrades in a long time.
Yeah, exactly. So I was going to cross. What's that?
Version 2 of the shirt.
Version 2, yeah. I was going to cross off imaging and put upgrades like on a post-it note, but thought that might look a little weird. So yeah, limited edition.
Actual question. When did Jamf as a company decide to upgrade everybody to 10.8? I have most of my users still on 10.7. 10.8 never got stable enough for me. And I'm just curious, is it something you guys do right away? Wait till 10.8.3? Or
We moved right away. Most of the development was there anyways, just for what our core function kind of requires that we understand some of that stuff. But I think as an organization, we had moved within a couple weeks. The whole group. Is any from RIT here, Alan, or I don't know, whatever?
I think it was available like 2 days after the release in self-service for us all to do it. The way it was done was, and some of you are probably already doing this, but packaging up the app, downloading it, and then running a script that called it, right? So our end users actually walked through the couple of steps to select the drive they wanted to upgrade and so forth. And it worked pretty well. The one thing that this brings to the table over that is, first of all, the end users don't have to make those decisions. And then the other part is being able to just push it out in a lab environment, we think is going to be really beneficial as well. Yeah.
Question over here, yeah. Luger, move.
Does it take into account the other versions? For instance, I noticed that was upgraded 10.8. Is there a process to streamline it to 10.8.5?
It's a good question. As far as I know, Apple typically will update the app that is in the App Store. So if you were to download the latest version of that, it should absolutely work in terms of getting you from 10.8.1 to 10.8.5. The other thing it could be useful for is if a machine becomes unbootable or something like that. This would be a first thing to try, I guess. Well, not if it's unbootable because it can't run policy, but if the Finder's not launching or the dock is weird or for whatever reason, it's a great first step for remediating a machine as well. Yeah.
And then a second note, for the managed account, the Jamf managed account, is that stored, is the home directory stored in var? That explains why I can't log in after that.
That account literally doesn't exist. The home folder will be there, but it doesn't exist. So that's why he was saying to have a script that will recognize that smart computer group. It's like a Jamf binary will continue to work, but that account doesn't exist. So it will still submit inventory reports. We create a smart computer group that just says, if this account doesn't exist, run this script and it will recreate that account.
And it depends how you have it set up. If you don't have the hide this account, I think that's the big variable here, right? If you don't have that checked, then it's not going to be in private var or whatever. It's just going to be with your users' directories. So it kind of depends on how you deployed it.
So follow up to the OS installer question. You can't really tell the version that you have on the drive. You look at the get info and it's like some other random version. When you put it in Casper admin, does it show you the version?
It does not show you in Casper admin. It shows you in the JSS.
Okay,
Yep.
so there you go.
Yep.
So that's another thing. I thought this is where you're going. So in the example that we had, 10.6.8 to 10.7, 10.7 to 10.8, as long as you're at 10.6.8, you can move to any of the others. As we're kind of going through, like, it's not that you have to iterate through each one of those. If we're at 10.6.8 at a minimum, which is basically at 10.6.8 and later is when the framework is there to be able to take care of this stuff, that's when you can move to, like Mavericks or whatever. Maybe. We got Nick up. Oh, we got him over here. Sorry.
Yeah, just a little addition on to the hidden account getting erased. That was a known Apple bug. I've been working with them for a year, and mine's working now. It no longer gets erased in an upgrade. So sub 500s now works again. And
Sweet.
They said that completed.
He's clapping.
All right.
Using your process last year, after we got everything set up, I was able to upgrade about 2,000, 2,500 machines in 90 days. This year, my leadership said, do it in 30. So it's both good and a curse that, like
Interesting.
you said, as we're able to do it faster,
Yeah.
now they want our entire development team up in 30 days.
Can you post how that goes? I mean, that sounded more placating. I'm excited to hear how this is successful and being able to use some of this stuff. And if it's not successful, then just don't. Yeah.
So my imaging workflow is based on the install ESD DMG. With this new support for using the full installer app from Apple, would that mean that I could switch from using the install ESD in my imaging workflow to the full app to avoid having both the install ESD and the full app in my Casper share? I'd rather not duplicate the data if I can avoid it.
Mm-hmm. It's a good question. At this point, if you already have an install ESD, it's not going to work directly for this feature, but it will work vice versa. So if you are using one of these for this method of, we call it OS upgrades at this point because it is different from imaging. I think that's an important distinction to make here. Imaging is still great. It's a great way to get your machine set up the first time for your end users. So there's no configuration after the fact, and there's thin imaging, and we can get into another discussion on that. But this is different. This is taking machines that end users have already and getting them upgraded. But yeah, the answer to your question is yes. If you upload one of those apps into Casper Admin, it will also work as a source for imaging. Thanks.
Other stuff. Yeah. We need 2 Chris Lugers. Thank you, Chris Luger, for your help, buddy.
So currently I have a restricted software on install osx.app. Will I have to change that for any devices that are going to get upgraded? Or is it actually calling it as they're launching a different app?
I think it should work. That's a good question. So the 2 parts that I'm thinking of is I'm assuming that the restricting that is so that end users don't go out and do it. And there may be some other ways, maybe, that we can help solve that problem. So let's talk afterwards. There's ways that we can do it. I don't know for sure explicitly how that works. Do you, Nick?
Yeah, I can say with confidence it'll work.
Nick knows.
Yeah.
That's why Nick's here. I just wear stupid T-shirts.
Yeah.
How much space would you recommend having free on a teacher's 64 gig drive to provide something? So we can smart group against that, or at least give them some idea, hey, this is everything out there.
Yeah, comfortably I would say.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Oh yeah, the question was how much space should we have free on laptops or machines when we deploy this? It's going to depend on the hardware, absolutely, but definitely comfortably, probably 15 to 20 gigs because this file is 5 gigs in size, and we want to give them enough space if they're not going to be installing it right away to be able to work on the machine still and still have enough virtual memory and stuff like that. So yeah.
Does it throw it away when it's done?
Question is, does it throw it away when it's done?
Yes, it does. Yep.
Yes.
It throws away, so the question was, does it throw away the cache? It throws away all of the files that are used for upgrading the machine. Yeah, so it takes that cached file that we bring down to the machine, moves it over essentially into a live location that's actually used for the upgrade, and then after the upgrade that gets removed. It's actually removed by OS 10. Yep.
Are there... Oh.
The package receipt remains in place. So basically the Casper suite, the question was, do we have to do anything about updating that smart group because then the cache goes away? It's kind of complex to explain, but there's a package receipt that gets placed on there saying that this package got cached. That part does not get removed. It's a very small file. It's about 1K in size probably. And that stays in place just to indicate that this has been cached to this drive until you wipe the machine. Yep.
Are there any methods in place to get around the user interaction portion at the end of the installer?
So you're talking about the iCloud setup and those things? It's something we wanted to tackle with this project. We wanted to focus more on making sure we could get the machines upgraded first. I think it's a great thing that we can add, we can bring to the table at some point. Right now, there's some great scripts out on Jamf Nation on how to do that, how to bypass the iCloud Setup Assistant and some of the others. We're working on it.
We've got one up here too, Chris, all the way at the top. Jump one, guys. We're avoiding Kevin. I'm just kidding.
If you deployed 10.7 without a recovery partition, will this process work?
Will that work? Yeah.
And it'll create the recovery partition for...
Yes, and that's a great point as well. It upgrades the recovery partition if it's old, and if it doesn't exist, it adds it. So it's just like the end user experience of installing it manually. Yep.
So back to the cached example, in your second smart group, it looks for the receipt of the cached item, but then the cached item gets thrown away. They go back to self-service, there'll still be the button there to run the installer, or no?
It depends how you set up the policy. If you set the frequency to that as once per computer, it will disappear. But if you want to leave it there for users to fix their computers or something like that, there's no harm in doing that. It's just that they might be able to run the install again and use more bandwidth, right?
With kind of the old version of doing this, the JSS wouldn't actually know what version of the OS was on the machine until you had run inventory. Does that change with this new process?
That does not change. So you can actually set up your policies to detect that, depending on how you have your environment set up. Right now, by default, inventory is once every day, or once every week, I believe, right? So you could increase that frequency. You could change it to happen at a different trigger. There's different things you could do to make sure that's updated more frequently. But yeah, it is still going to be a little bit of a delay to detect whether that's been upgraded or not.
Good. Oh, we'll come back to you.
So this is still just caching the native installer down to the waiting room folder, right? And then upon policy execution, moving it all out of that folder into the main folder, executing, then once it's done, terminating the installer and deleting it, right?
Essentially, yes. It's not bringing the entire app down. When you drag that onto Casper Admin, it's extracting the components that are necessary to do this. So you're not going to see the full app that you dragged into Casper Admin on the machine. You'll see components of it.
We had one over here. You can just say it and we can repeat it if that's easy too.
Just thinking about this upgrade, I know with any clients that are on 10.6 that might have been encrypted using file vault 1, the original file vault 1, versus going to like 10.8 or 10.9.
Yep.
I know in the past that when you've done those types of upgrades in place, it tends to legacy file vault, so it keeps it in file vault 1 as opposed to unencrypting it and then re-encrypting the full disk. Do you know if there are any tools that are going to be out there for that? Because I know especially with file vault 1, there's no command line interfaces at all to do anything with that, versus 2 has a lot more command line tools. But I'm just wondering if and I know it's not out yet, but people using this particular method may be going to Mavericks. Does anybody know if it was keeping that legacy file vault 1 state, or is it something else to try to unencrypt it, re-encrypt it, or?
Yeah, so the question's about moving from 10.6 to basically anything that's at file vault 1 encrypted to 10.8, 10.9, or something that has file vault 2, and how's that going to handle because of the differences that are there and the stuff that, are there tools available to help me decrypt, move on, upgrade, and then go from there? From the Casper Suite standpoint, there's nothing that's going to decrypt the drive, do this upgrade process, see that it was decrypted, and then encrypt, and kind of go from there. I don't know, I haven't heard of anything as far as specific tools for 10.6 that are going to help. I don't know if you've got thoughts on it.
Casper Suite?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, we've got the file vault integration, and I think that's a great application of it. We're able to inventory still and tell you which users are file vault 1 enabled, and then using our file vault 2 integration, you could actually turn it on. So you could use smart groups and policies to do some of those things after the upgrade as well if you wanted to.
But chances are, if you are in file vault 1 and, say the upgrade, using Casper does, bring it fully all the way up to whatever OS you're trying to upgrade to. It sounds like at some point, if you want to change from one to the other, that there's no really tools in Casper that the machine's going to probably have to be physically touched and unencrypted and re-encrypted, probably using the password. But at some point, someone's going to have to go and actually like punch a button to turn that off and decrypt it. So, is that accurate?
Yeah.
Inline tools, and I think there's nothing in Casper that really does anything with Firewall 1.
The hook is the decryption of File Vault 1. So that part, can we automate the decryption of File Vault 1 using what we have? No. Can we move once a device is decrypted? Can we report on it, know what's there, see what our target, go touch these, fix, and then deploy File Vault 2 and extensions of File Vault 2? Yes. So it's, yeah.
For cases where the license pool isn't bottomless, does this method dovetail nicely with the existing license management in Casper in terms of like being able to distinguish between machines upgraded and machines born with Mavericks?
Right. So basically, how do we do license differentiation between what of my devices did I have to buy Mavericks licenses for, and what did I buy a new device and got a license in that? I think that there's ways in the framework to be able to take care of some of that stuff. When we're looking at the package receipt, we can see these are the devices that have that package receipt there. These are the devices that I had that in the policy history to see. Here are the devices that I've actually upgraded, and then comparing that against what I've purchased or what I actually own for an operating system. Does that help?
Yeah.
Great. Let's move over here.
I know it might be slightly off topic. I know this is an OS migration, but if we were to reimage a machine, is there a way of using the app to reimage? I know back in 10.6 and so Casper 7, you had the way you could choose the OS installer language and things like that. You had like a hook in. Is there a way of doing that through the imaging as well for maybe for 10.8, and so we don't have to create an Insta DMG OS or something. You can pay if we want and do that using some of these tools.
Yeah, you can still select the language. So it appears just like an install ESD in Casper Admin. So you select the language. At this point, we don't allow customization of the actual components on anything 10.7 and above, either in imaging or in OS upgrades at this point.
Is it going to work with Fusion drives and rated drives?
If the manual installation works, everything that we can see at this point, yes, it will work. And another topic that comes up is File Vault. Yes, it'll work with that as well. So if the machine's already encrypted with 10.7, can I upgrade it to 10.8? Yes, you can do that.
Any other thoughts, questions, concerns? Timeline? This is a feature of the next version of the Casper Suite. The question's timeline. When can folks expect to start using this type of thing? Next version of the Casper Suite. 9.2. Yep.
We don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. It's geared around Apple's next release. How's that? Yeah, I'm a politician sometimes. Any other thoughts, questions? Cool. Well, thank you very much for coming to spend time. Hopefully this is helpful.